This time we're doing things a little bit differently. I've just been in Singapore just a few weeks ago, and during my trip there, we teamed up with local coffee company Asylum, and we did a bunch of different coffee events. And what we're going to show you here is actually a series of 3 different videos in 3 different parts, where we discuss different aspects of coffee pretty much. The first one is what they refer to as the Battle of the Brewer. So it's me talking about just different pour-over methods and the different qualities and kind of aspects that comes with that. The second one, it's focused on green coffee, sourcing, and we're all kind of doing a long cupping together, discussing certain taste profiles and where flavors in coffee actually comes from. And the last and final one, number 3, is a little bit of a Q&A/book presentation where I share more about the story behind April, how we ended up where we are today, and just an open Q&A with the people that were kind enough to join us at that event.
For everyone, I think it's important to try to understand, and it's a relevant conversation that the industry is very much having now. It's how and why is coffee tasting the way it does? So what makes coffee taste like flavor? Like, so if I say that a coffee has notes of like red fruits and jasmines or peach or whatever, where does that actually come from? And it's quite simple. It comes from a combination of different factors. And that should be varietal, first of all. So what kind of varietal are we working with? I've already mentioned that April is really into different varietals. We have about 100 active varietals that we work with in the coffee world within the Arabica tree of coffee. Robusta has nothing to do with specialty coffee, so we're not really debating with that. Then there's a few other families that are kind of coming into the coffee world, or people are trying very hard to come into it. The main kind of interest in different varietals, and let's say Robusta now, is the fact that people are questioning is if we have enough quality Arabica in the future. So people like to convince others that Robusta is tasting good. Which it doesn't in relationship to Arabica, right? So we talk about varietal, we talk about local terroir. When I mean terroir at a farm, we're basically talking about the basics. So we're talking about soil. Different soils have different characters, transfer nutrients differently to the different coffees. We're talking about shade trees, we're talking about wind, we're talking about temperatures, we're talking about the tree structure in itself, we're talking about the root system. We're basically talking about highly complicated stuff, which is quite hard to understand if you're not a coffee farmer. Stuff like age of the tree is really important. So you plant a tree, it can take 3 to 4 or 5 years for that tree to bear like a proper harvest. Year 6, year 7, year 8, the tree will continue to mutate, and it's technically not the same tree as it was a few years back. So the cherries will change as well, right? So there's a lot of different factors from the actual farm that's gonna have an impact on the quality of that coffee. And that's kind of what we're gonna taste today. Second part is always going to be processing. So when we refer to processing, is pretty much what happens with the coffee after it's picked, pretty much. So coffee is picked in full cherry. If you're a good farmer, you measure the Brix content, which is the sugar content of the coffee before you pick it, because you want to make sure it's ripe. If it's not ripe, it's not going to be good. Basically, what we pay for when it comes to specialty coffee is that someone is sorting the coffee. Someone has selectively picked a certain cherry at a certain time. Because part of the issue in coffee is that the whole tree of cherries is not going to ripen at the same time. So if we pick everything at the same time, we're going to have a different level of ripeness, different level of sugar, and that's going to taste differently. Like we all have eaten like unripe fruit versus ripe fruit. It's the same thing in coffee, right? So that means it's very, very important. Then when it comes to processing, it's basically how do we get the fruit out of the seeds? That's pretty much how we do it. So how do we get rid of the fruit? And there's different ways to do it. We're talking about natural processed coffees where you basically don't take the seeds out until the very end. So you let the coffee process in the cherry. That's going to bring certain characters to the coffee. We have 1 or 2 of those on the table. We have what we call wash processed coffee, which is basically you pick the cherries. Usually you soak them overnight in water, and then you go through a depulping machine. So a machine that takes away all the fruit pretty much. And then you dry that coffee on either patios or raised beds. Then you have different kind of variations of that. So we have like yellow honey, red honey,
Are we leaving a
golden
seed
honey,
in each one?
lots of different honey. Every single farm has slightly different ideas on how you do this. But the key thing basically is that you need to be able to first remove the cherry in some shape or form, and you need to dry that cherry to a specific moisture content. Again, that's also what it comes down to specialty coffee. In specialty coffee, we spend time measuring all of these things so we have a greater understanding for the coffee itself. Moisture level has a direct impact on coffee quality and a direct impact on shelf life of coffee, meaning how long is that coffee going to stay good basically after it's processed, right? More recently, we are also discussing different kinds of tank fermentations. So like stainless steel tank fermentations in best cases. Unfortunately, in most cases, random plastic bucket where we put the coffee in. Not very nice. Coffee is in this kind of world of transition where we're trying to adapt a lot of the wine fermentations pretty much into the coffee world. So that means anaerobic fermentation, which is basically low oxygen fermentation. And it means different yeast, different bacteria actually added to the tank in the coffee to basically then break down the sugars and create new acids. I think what's very important to understand with processing is that processing cannot create flavors that isn't there originally. Processing is there to potentially elevate what's in the coffee. But today on the market, you see a lot of coffees that actually taste very specific, like Stuart was saying, let's say specific of strawberry or peach or whatever, like very singular. Those are what we call infused coffees, which is a new thing in the industry, and this shouldn't be here in the first place. But basically what that is that it's often anaerobic tanks that are pressurized and infused with flavored gas. That's basically how you do it. The key trick to kind of see if anyone is doing it is that if you come to a farm and they won't show you the fermentation tanks, then it's for sure a farm that does infused coffees, right? And those coffees.
This is new for us. Like after meeting Patrik and hearing this, I'm questioning everything now in my life. Of coffee. No, but it's great. I think
but the thing is, I mean, as I mentioned before, I'm kind of involved in these coffee competitions, right? And to be fair, the winning coffee over the last years in both competitions has all been what we say infused coffees. Basically, then coffees that are created to have a singular flavor structure, so it's easier for me as a competitor to communicate that flavor to a judge that is supposed to taste it, right? And let's be honest about that, right? And I think that the fact that the official competition world actually now approved infused coffees in competitions is them admitting that yes, the winners have all been infused coffees over the last 10 years, right? So I think it's there. Now we kind of have to discuss whether or not we want to be a part of it, right? At April, we're not a part of it. That's pretty straightforward. Basically, the reason why we travel to, like, the way that we purchase coffee is very specific. We don't buy from importers. So let's say CoffeeNet, no offense to CoffeeNet, but we buy all of our coffees direct. The way the farmers work is very simple. They're gonna basically showcase the range of coffees that they have produced. If you're an importer, they're gonna showcase a certain range of their coffees. The importer will make a selection, and then the importer will show that selection to you, which means that someone has already made that selection twice before I'm making my selection, right? So the way that we do is that we buy direct from our producers, we buy from them continuously, which means we're gonna have first pick. So before that importer is making that choice, I've already taken the best stuff. So like say the people that buy coffee from auctions and stuff like that, you guys are all paying way too much money for the bad stuff that was over after we bought the good stuff. Which is why you shouldn't buy auction coffees, for example. So it's a lot to understand about that kind of world of coffee and trading. We're trying to be as kind of simple and consistent as possible. One of the things that we're doing now, which is we actually have a coffee from a cooperative today, but moving into this year, we're not going to buy coffee from any cooperatives as a roastery. Even last year, we only had one cooperative, so we only buy from single farmers. Because we're all about transparency and we want to be able to taste where the coffee is from. The reason why you travel around the world to meet producers is that you want to be able to showcase and taste the individual experience that comes from their coffees. That's why I hate infused coffees. Because infused coffees, everyone can make their coffee taste like that. It's just a matter of doing it. Doesn't matter which farm, doesn't matter which varietal, doesn't matter where you are in the world, doesn't matter if it's Arabica or Robusta, right? And generic coffee is uninteresting for me on the higher kind of level of coffee. It could be interesting for the commercial market, potentially, but I'm not a part of that, so it's not a consideration. Stuart, anything to add? No. So basically, like to sum it up a little bit, so varietal matters, terroir matters, processing matters, right? Obviously roasting matters, another aspect of it, right? And what we're gonna do now is basically a cupping or a coffee tasting, which I think for most roasteries is the predominant way to kind of taste the coffee, right? So in bottom line, it's a super easy way to taste many coffees next to each other, right? And when we go to farms, when we go to coffee events, when we buy from importers, when we do quality control, this is how a lot of roasteries are brewing their coffees pretty much. It's also, because it's a full immersion brew, kind of similar to a press pod-ish. It means we don't have any paper filters. So usually I'm going to argue this is the tastiest way to enjoy your cup of coffee. Unfortunately, it's not the most practical way to enjoy it. But basically what we're doing now is we're just basically grinding all of the coffees. After we grind all the coffees and put them on the table, we're gonna have you just smell the aroma. We have to be a little bit efficient here. We're like a lot of people. We're already running behind a little bit. But basically we have a bunch of different tables with the exact same setup. So we're just grouping you guys into like different parts of the tables. And we're gonna taste the same way that we did before. So basically cupping spoon, pour it in a cup and drink. It's the most efficient way to do it. Slurping coffee also never makes sense because it's a terrible way to actually get to taste the coffee.
Again, we are new. For Asylum, we're new, and when we went to these cupping sessions and we felt very out of place from this things, I didn't feel comfortable doing them. I was very happy just drinking hygienic. Especially especially coming out from COVID, it's hygienic. So on the tables, there are going to be cups. When you come in your groups of kind of 12, if you find one is crowded, move on to the next table. Yeah, you're going to get one cup. The spoons are exactly on the right side of the cup that you're supposed to take the coffee out from. A lot of you are coffee professionals, so I'm going to let your one person each at each table be a professional, whatever you call that, break the crust, husk, whatever, smell it, right? Because I'm not going to do everyone, Patrik's not going to do everyone, so one of you, 自动, right? Yeah, have a bit of initiative. We'll have a timer on each one, sort of 4 minutes, right? Yep, 4 minutes, yeah. Yeah, that's the first one.
That's the water, yeah. But it's going to be pretty straightforward. It's a bit messy because we're a lot of people, but we figured this out. And then what we're going to do afterwards is that we're basically going to give you guys a walkthrough of what you're tasting. So traditionally, when you do these kind of tastings, you don't talk too much about the coffee beforehand because we don't want to color your experience too much. What will be very clear, I mean, we even have notes with the coffees, right? But one side is April and one side is Coffee Net. So I think that's a pretty clear distinction. You're going to taste the difference. How has Coffee Net roasted their coffees?
Ikewa.
All right. Easy. Now is a great time for a question, actually.
Yes, questions? What is cupping?
What is cupping, or like why?
You don't know what's cupping?
No, go for it.
Huh?
Please explain.
Okay, from a new point of view, 2 years in, purely because they're going to give you a variation of whatever the farm or the supplier or whatever has in his inventory that they're shipped over, and you get to taste at a cupping level. So normally when it happens, it's about 4-minute brew. After it's brewed 4 minutes, you break the crust to smell the aroma on the coffee. You do a little bit of a stir to get anything that's up there down, and then you can sniff it. Then you take a spoon, put it in one of your cups. This is a hygiene method. Put it in one of your cups, and then you taste. Then you move on from one coffee to the next. Yeah, we will break the crust at the same time, more or less, because it's timed 4 minutes. So we'll left to right. Yeah.
Basically, we're just brewing coffee in a bowl and we're going to taste it with a spoon.
Yeah.
That's like the most easy way to describe it.
Yeah.
And it's just, again, it's just like an easy, convenient way to brew coffee. That's how it actually originates back from the 1800s, where there was a sales guy in, I believe it was in New York, but I'm not sure, that was trying to figure out how he can have his customer taste the coffees when they came into his store. That's like the original version of it. And then people adapted it into farms or whatever, right? So it's just a really fast, because one of the challenges when you do these kind of tastings, or let's say you quality control in a roastery, maybe you have 30, 40, 60, 100 different coffees you have to taste. And if you were to brew all of them individually, it will take forever, pretty much. So this is just a little bit of laziness, a little bit of convenience, pretty much.
We're almost there.
We're almost there.
5 minutes, hopefully. The reason why it takes so long is because we can't have the previous coffee that we've grinded still stuck in the grinder, so you need to purge that and then you move to the next one. If not, you'll be tasting coffee from another sample. Any more questions? Yes. Yeah. Sure, got a question. Yes. Sorry. Yeah, you.
So usually for like let's say I order tasting notes, is it tasting notes from this coffee, or is it from a tasting notes brewed using a 360 or whatever?
Sometimes because the farm usually does, they do supply you a bunch of taste notes, right? But when it comes here again, it's much fresher when it's up there, and then when it comes here, it might change. So you can do your own. Some roasters do their own, and then they write their own versions of their taste notes. Yeah, some just take straight off from the producer.
It really depends on the roastery. I know a lot of roasteries that just take whatever the coffee net tells them to, or Nordic, like whatever imported they have. Some roasteries spend a lot of time tasting their own coffees. At April, it would be a combination. Yep. So it's basically a combination of reflection from different styles of brewing, but also cupping. I would say 99% of the cases is cupping based. Yeah, so people would taste it like this, because flavors in coffee doesn't really change. Basically, if I brew this with a V60 or Kalita, the original flavor of that coffee is not going to be changing. What will change is how you display that flavor in the cup. So it's always going to be there, unless you do something extremely weird. Mm-hmm. But like in most cases, if you taste it here, it's going to be in that cup. Pretty much. It's just, if anything, is a good kind of starting point to try to evaluate how do I want to brew this coffee. Is it an acidic coffee? Is it a fruity coffee? Is there a lot of floral notes? And then basically choose the style of brewing, right? So let's say we compete, especially in a barista championship. The step one, and the reason why we do this a lot, is because we need to hunt for a green coffee with a very good acidity structure, as in it's very well integrated. And you do that easier here rather than brewing a bunch of espresso, right? So it's kind of making that initial step and then building from there. Yeah.
Patrik, earlier, I think the word that you mentioned that really stuck with me, ecosystem. Mm-hmm. So in the context of like cupping coffees, right, and visiting multiple farms and maybe doing a tasting across all of the samples, when you approach such times, mm-hmm. would you say you import like a mini ecosystem of yours that works in that situation? Because a lot of us, our experiences, or rather what's available to us, would be roasted samples from importer, exporter, or even like just shipped in from origin from producers as well. So would it be more optimal to somehow, if we can afford, create a mini ecosystem that we could import or export or use to our full advantage when selecting coffees?
I mean, did everyone hear that? Or should I repeat the question?
Yes.
So the question is basically, buying coffee is difficult. How do we make that less difficult? more or less, right? So it's the part of the challenge that he mentioned, that if you're a smaller roastery, you're gonna have probably, you talk to an importer and you ask for samples and they send you like a roasted sample, and then you try that, and then you kind of hope that in the end what you're gonna get from the farm is the same thing, right? So basically the challenge on a farm level is that samples comes in multiple different times during the season. So let's say that you go to a farm and you cup the fresh harvest. That's going to be a very, very small selection, like 200 grams of one of the lots that are like quickly kind of hand sorted, and that's what you roast and what you taste. Then you're going to go through the full kind of processing or milling process. The lot is going to be completed, and you're going to take a sample from that lot. And that lot has gone through like a density sorter, a color sorter, and so on and so on. And those two are going to taste very different. And then when they ship that sample to you or to an importer, that sample will change a lot from when that sample comes to when it actually arrives in your roastery and you're roasting it. So the issue with coffee initially, especially in the very beginning, is that it's changing a lot from a quality perspective, right? So it's not a stable enough product in those kind of early days. Then you have, so one of the reasons why we don't buy from importers is that most of them are really bad at roasting. So when they send you roasted samples, the coffee doesn't taste good. And the reason why we don't let our farmers roast is the same reason. I think what a lot of people should consider, and it's maybe not talked about enough, is the fact that a lot of farmers don't taste their own coffees. Most farmers have other institutions quality control their coffees and give them a score.
Right.
So you send the coffee to usually a local institution, and they taste their coffees, and then they send cupping notes back to the farmer, and then the farmer says, yeah, this is how my coffee is tasting. So there's not a lot of farmers that actually goes, I know exactly how my coffee is tasting and why, right? So usually it's a bit of a random process like that. For us at April, it's very easy. We roast all of our coffees ourselves. We only take samples directly from the producer. Usually, basically, we go to the farm, we get the samples, we take the samples with us, and then that's basically when we roast and cup them. Now, not everyone can do that for obvious reasons. It takes time, it's quite expensive.
Yep.
But part of the challenge is that, and this goes both importer and farmer, is that what you're asking for is not always what you get.
Yep.
It's very, very clear that a lot of importers are not giving you what you're actually paying for. There's some like pretty interesting stories that you don't want to hear if you're a roastery that buys from importers. But basically, it's all sales. If you ask for a coffee, if you want a natural Pacamara from El Salvador from a special farm, and that farm doesn't have any more coffee that season, they'll find a natural Pacamara for you from another farm and say it's that farm, right? So it's a lot of stuff like that that people don't always understand. It's business.
Yep.
Don't underestimate the length people will do to kind of make that happen. And it's also true in a lot of cases with farmers. That I'm not saying a farmer is trying to screw you over, but I'm saying a farmer they will always try to sell the coffee. And if you're not on top of your things, it's not going to work. Like April is kind of notorious in the farming world for being really, really difficult to work with, because we're one of the few farmers that are very, let's say, honest with the producers and very clear when we think that something isn't the way it should be. And it's interesting because when you, a good example is one of our producers in Costa Rica, and I'm pretty sure, and this was like 5 years ago when we met the first time, I'm pretty sure I was the first one ever to tell him that his coffee wasn't good enough. Because that's not a conversation usually, right? And I think especially now with, let's say, infused coffees, and the biggest challenge in the coffee industry, like globally, is the fact that we have so many new roasteries. And the issue is not that there are new roasteries on the market and there's competition. The issue is that with every new roastery comes a green coffee buyer. So everyone that starts a coffee roastery is all of a sudden a person that is buying green coffee from like an importer or from a farm, whatever, right? And they have no education, they don't know what they're doing, and the farmers are not stupid. They know that they have a very wide audience of buyers that have no clue and will buy whatever they put in front of them, right? And I think that's what we're seeing a lot of now, right? So, like, specialty coffee has never been as bad as it is today, historically. We're like, hopefully at the low point. Hopefully. If it gets much worse, I'm not sure what to do. But that's the biggest challenge, and the big part of our April struggle is that we have a harder time having this communication, because for every lot I reject from a producer, they go, yeah, sure, I just sell it to these guys, which is, you know, to be fair, and I mean, not to disrespect, but it's usually the Asia or the Middle East. And they just go, it doesn't matter if you don't like it, these guys will buy whatever I give them. So it's like a challenging time at the moment, I think, in the industry. That was a long answer, but it's kind of a relevant one. Like, we have to understand that, let's say what you guys drink in a coffee shop or brew in a coffee shop, it's never better than the raw material we're working with.
Yeah.
Never. Like, there's no, like, that's how it is. So if we don't have good coffee or good green coffee, we can't brew and, you know, give you guys good coffee, right? And I think because people are realizing that good coffee is kind of complicated, that's why we are in this fermentation mess that we're in now, right? Because it's kind of the shortcut to make coffee taste better, right? Yeah.
That was great.
Does that make sense?
I think when we first started, there was also the other frustration where it felt like you were getting into the industry, something totally new, and a lot of people are looking at you like, who are these guys? Do they know how to roast? Why are they there? What were they doing? And it wasn't a very nice, inclusive kind of like industry, and it's just the way it is. We're trying to break the mold and making friends and all that, hoping for friends, and you want to be my friend. So yeah, and by that having friends, then you spread transparency, right? You can share the stuff that you discovered. Yeah, this coffee is kind of like questionable, and you share notes. But there's a lot of like closed doors, gated stuff that Bobby was talking about, right? And we're trying to break the mold. We're trying to. The more they're sharing, the more you know what you're buying, and then the goal is the whole of Singapore's specialty stuff, like raises a level. Because I mean, there's something that Patrik said. I'm not gonna quote you. Oh man, yeah.
What are you saying?
He said something along like some of the coffees that we've had like over the past few days, it felt like Sweden 6 years ago or something like that, in the specialty coffee scene.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we want to raise the bar. We hope that people in the industry want to raise the bar, and we can do it together. I know it's a business. We all need to make money and all that stuff. Sure, there's rent and all that. But I think if we can all be more of a community, Singapore very small. We're tiny, right? And we don't want to work together. Then they look at us as a Singapore coffee scene, right? And then you can't just always have that 1-2 names that's out there. And if we're all like really into it, then we should be more tight-knit and be more transparent and share more stuff, right? You learn more, you grow more.
Good, like we're almost getting ready here, but just a good example on that same note is that, and again, like now we're very industry specific, so I apologize if there's people that are not able to follow, but let's say in the competition world now, like say the World Championships or even the national like Singaporean Championships, there's this like then conversation about the kind of coffees that usually win, and whether the coffees are like fair to be, you know, used or not used, infused, and so on, right? The reality is, if it wasn't for the competitors bringing certain coffees to the competitions, we would never be in this mess in the first place, right? So like judges are evaluating the coffee that competitors are giving them, just as your customers and the industry at large are drinking the coffee that you are giving them, right? So as an industry, we always have an opportunity to come together, both in the competition world, which has never been done, which we should probably do. It's like sit down and go, okay, but what do we want to be, like how do we put Singapore on the coffee map? Yeah. How do we define that, right? Because everyone in a city, much as Copenhagen did with food, that was restaurants coming together saying, how do we make this into a destination, right? And that has helped everyone in that city. And I think coffee-wise is something people could do as well. Competition-wise is something we should do. That would solve so many issues. That's a very side note. Let's talk about this. So we're kind of ready. We're at least waiting for 1 cup here.
2 cups.
We're waiting for 2 cups.
Yeah. 2
Is that
cups.
coming?
April.
We don't have enough cups here.
What, are we out of cups?
Yeah.
Here?
But basically what we can do, everyone, is that we can try to, in a little bit of an organized way, try to portion ourselves out over these tables. Again, 1 table has the exact same coffees.
Yeah.
So you only have to be at 1 table, right?
Yeah.
But see if we can portion ourselves out, and then we're just gonna walk you through what we're supposed to be doing, yeah?
Yeah, let's
Go
do
for
that.
it, let's get up.
Okay, guys. Patrik has 1 question. Well, I like that.
That works.
Patrik has 1 question that someone has already given. He's going to answer the question now.
Yeah,
Ready
so
and go.
I got a question which I think is kind of a relevant question in general, and it was basically, how do I get in contact with the producers? So basically someone with a coffee business that wants to maybe start buying direct, and how do you actually initiate that conversation? I think you can do that in a lot of different ways today, pretty much. And there's farmers on Instagram, if you want to, right? They all have websites, so you can be like traditional and just kind of call them if you want to as well. For me, it's been a little bit of, it's been like a few different stories behind the coffees, whereas let's say Diego that we cupped the 2 last coffees, the Washed Geisha and the Natural Pacamara, he is actually, I tried coffee from him like many years ago, 8 years ago. And I actually got him into the roastery I was working in before April. And then I started April, and I didn't want to take any of my previous relationships from that company with me into the new company, because that's not good courtesy, like that's not how you do it, right? So we waited for 5 years until we kind of called him up and said like it's time to do something together. So him I knew from before. Ana Maria and Nicolas from Pico Caya was actually just a friend of mine traveling in Ecuador, a commercial coffee buyer, and Pico Caya, their farm, is actually right next door to this very large commercial farm. And he always cupped coffees, and he happened to cup one of those coffees. And he just called me and said, I know this really good little farm in Ecuador, you should start talking with them. So it's always a little bit of randomness, but I think you should always, if you're looking to set up any kind of relationship, I mean, talk to roasters that are already working with the coffees that you're looking for, right? Obviously, you can talk to importers as well. There's nothing wrong with, like, April started to buy from importers as well when in the very beginning, because it's easier. So it's not a bad thing to do. We just switched that out after a while, right? But it's different. Go to SCA events. Like SCA, the Specialty Coffee Organization, has a bunch of events all over the world. Usually there's a lot of producers coming to them, which is always interesting. So I think there is a lot of different ways to find them. Oh yeah, just Google them. Google has all the answers.
Just Google, yeah. But I think building relationships, I think would be great if it's possible.
Always, right? And I mean, let's say you would want to have one of the producers we work with, then just ask me and I'll give you the phone number. I mean, it's not so difficult, right? It's all just connections. Then it's kind of up to them if they want to work with you or not. But most farmers want to sell coffee, so it's usually that's not an issue, right? Yeah. I think that was an okay answer.
Yeah,
to
but
that.
like I said, like transparency, building relationships among the people in the industry, sharing stuff will help us grow better as a coffee industry. I mean, people selling coffee, especially coffee in Singapore. So I think, yes.
True though.
Talk, share.
We
don't come in and go like meekly and then drink coffee and leave and then think, is this bad? If it's bad, right, or if something you don't really like, talk to the people. And if they're open enough, we can all improve together. But if you're going to go around and like spread the rumors and bad vibes, then we're not going to grow together. That's all I have to say. Yes.
True that though. And I mean, most farmers, at least, I'm not going to say all farmers, but I mean, the producers we work with, apart from like making really tasty coffee, they're super nice people. Otherwise we wouldn't work with them, right? So it's, Nice people are like usually easy to talk to, and they're always kind of open for the conversation as well. So just like reach out for sure. So we don't have so much time, but we want. So basically, you guys read most of the information about the coffees you just tasted, maybe, or do you like need a rundown of all the coffees?
One question, anyone?
Up to you guys.
One question to the floor before we go into his book thing in half an hour.
Okay. No, but I mean, it's important that we know what we're tasting, right? And if we have any questions on what we tasted, now it's like a good time. I can answer the April stuff, and then I'm sure the other guy can answer the coffee nut stuff.
Yeah. No?
If we have some.
Sure, yes.
But did anything
yes.
taste good, for example?
The grind size?
Good question.
For cupping, what were you grinding it?
I don't know, like usually I would answer you in microns, but that's a bit too nerdy. In a basic conversation, like coarse, I would say. Coarse.
Like French press?
Yeah, whatever that is. Sure.
Whatever that is, yeah. French press and whatever that is, yes.
I have a friend of mine, and he like won a few world championships as well. Whenever he uses a grinders, he just puts it on 7, like regardless of grind size or anything. So basically, it doesn't really matter as long as you're not too fine. If you just want to kind of try it. If you want to be really hardcore, find a grinder that can give you a micron of like 625, and you'll be fine, right? But you don't have to do that either. Which grind size did you use today? 13.5 on a new Didding Sweet Lab number 2, whatever. Okay. Yeah. Basically coarse. Could you just grind some coffee and give her, then she can see? Yeah. Awesome.
Do you have any like preference like the choice of the style of coffee you want to use? Like flavor or like
So again, like we're very focused on varietals. That's super cool. We're very focused on like farm distinctive characters and flavors. So the producers that I try to work with have very specific like flavor attributes, as specific as coffee, like real coffee can get, right? So like if you taste, let's say 10 washed geishas from the best farms in Guatemala, I can pick out El Socorro blind 100 times over, because it has a certain flavor to his coffees. So a clean structure, again, a lot of varietal, a lot of processing, a lot of terroir, right? So it's not that we hate processing, it's more that we need everything to be in harmony, right? Most of the times we pick producers based on, 1, they have to be nice people. That's always in that equation. 2, the coffee has to be tasty. 3, they have to be transparent and make sense and be relevant. And that's about it, pretty much. Yeah.
Sounds easy. Sounds easy. Yeah.
It is pretty easy. It's not,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
Patrik, with regards to April's QC for cupping, do you take the TDS to measure to just check on how you want the solubility to be across?
So TDS, for those of you that don't know, is like how much coffee is in the cup, pretty much. So out of the coffee and the water, we calculate the amount of, like the brown liquid, we calculate how much percentage of that is coffee, pretty much. And there's a little tool called like a refractometer that would measure that. We're about 1.25, if you want to have like on a 1:17 ratio, 94 degrees Celsius.
Let's go.
And like no plastic cups.
Right, April Singapore coming.
Yeah, I said. Yeah. Good roast. That's like the first step, right? Yeah.
Distinctly different.
Yeah.
Good. Any more questions?
Is that it for now? One more question.
Just want to find out because the 2 rows of coffee that we had, coffee that was roasted locally, while the April coffee, I believe, was roasted in Copenhagen, right? During the transit flight to Singapore, does the flavor change?
Interesting question. It's something that I think has been debated a lot, also especially in competitions. Because when we compete, we travel to all these, like I competed in Melbourne last year, that's like far away. I never do anything extra with my coffee.
Grind
Never.
size.
So you have people that like vacuum pack it, you have people that tapes valves and stuff or whatever they do. I never do anything extra, and I never experienced that the coffee tastes different. So I think at least what you tried from April, based on how I want April to taste, is a very representative like table. So I wouldn't say it changes so much. Yeah.
Yes? No? Yes? Any more? Yes?
So we do cuppings just like this. I think there's always going to be an idea of like certain varietals would potentially be better. I'm a big sucker for like Pacamara espresso. I think that's something that is really tasty. Then again, like if it's a good coffee, there's little reason for why it wouldn't work on both. Then you have coffees with, let's say, a higher acidity structure. Certain Kenyan coffees. Certain geisha coffees, maybe that could be definitely more acidic in a roast situation. And if April is roasting, or let's say April is not burning our coffees. So when you brew espresso, you're gonna have a little bit more acidity than what you're used to. So if the coffee is very, very acidic originally from a green coffee situation, then that may not be optimal for espresso, right? So there are one or two coffees we make the decision not to use them for both. We always roast separately, but 90% of our coffees would be available as both filter or espresso. Yeah.
So you do roast and separately?
Always. Omni roast is laziness.
Yes. 100%. Yes, who? Yeah. Question, yes.
As in like how many times I taste the cups, or how many like the...
For people that don't really know what they're tasting, then they taste it.
Yeah.
This is apple, stone fruit.
Sure.
How do you reach that point? Do you have to practice?
You have to practice. You have to first let the coffee rest from roasting, have it at least 2 weeks old, so like all the gas is gone and it's like clean. You have to brew it well, but then for me personally, it was very much, I was fortunate enough early on when I started in coffee to cup with some really good cuppers. And one of the mistakes people do when they come to things like this and they taste coffees is that they're a bit too shy. They don't really go out and say, I think this coffee tastes like this. At April, when we cup, everyone has to have an opinion, and then sometimes we're quite harsh when that opinion is incorrect, in a loving way, but we have to be clear, like this is not the case. Because again, it's back to this, professionally, I don't think coffee is so subjective. Maybe. But I think it's really tasting with other people. That's the most important part. And not being afraid of saying, like, I think this coffee tastes like rhubarb, or bad example, jackfruit. And then someone else says, no, you're wrong. And then that's interesting. And then you can taste that same coffee and go, okay, but what is this, right? For me, for example, it's a good example coming to Singapore, because I tried coffee with a bunch of different coffee shops, and I couldn't really get my head around it. And then I took like a morning and tasted some coffee with some local baristas, just like actually the same coffee, just to like hear what's your perspective on this, right? Like, why is all of the espresso in Singapore tasting like this in like a generic way? And then it's very interesting to hear what someone else think about that, right? So you have to be in a situation where you have that conversation, and you can't be afraid to like, this is what I think about this coffee right now. And then you also have to listen to the people that know better. I can tell you that no, but this flavor note is not there, or no, yes, this is roasted to a certain degree that creates bitterness in the roast or whatever, right? Again, we should always respect the fact that people like different things, but the reason why a cup of coffee tastes the way it does is not really a debate. That's based on everything that happened up until that cup ended up on a table.
Yeah.
That's just the facts. Yeah. Come again? Good question. No. I think I'm one of the few, let's say, green coffee buyers or roasters that has absolutely no active part of processing. Because the way that I look at green coffee farming and processing is that I respect the producers. I don't think as a white middle-aged man that I'm a coffee farmer. I definitely don't know shit about processing, so I don't go to people and tell them what to do. I think that's an important way to do it. I think part of why coffee is as bad as it is that we have too many people asking things to be done that should never have been done, right? We picked it, like the way that I look at a producer is that they're a professional entrepreneur, craftsman, whatever, that is representing the work that they want to represent to the world, right? I've chosen them because I love their perspective on coffee. I'm not there to change their perspective. My only job is to share that with the world. So I would never go in and mess with what a producer is doing. I would actively try to understand it. Sometimes I've actively rejected it because it's not my thing. Like again, we have one farm now that we usually buy anaerobics from. I've canceled all of his anaerobics for 2 seasons. I think they're terrible. I would tell him, but it's not my job to tell him don't do this or do this, right? Because it's his or her choice. And that's up to them. Yeah, go for it. I have no interest in either. They don't taste the way I like. And I say that with a lot of respect and love for the people that are trying, but like April will never have them. I continuously taste them every year. I've tasted the best Liberica. I'm very aware of Sasa's little Liberica experiment in the Philippines. They just taste really bad. It's the same with Robusta as well. From my perspective, like it's not a kind of coffee I'm interested in. But again, I always try it, and I have a lot of friends that are trying very hard to convince me that there is stuff as well there, and maybe one day, but it's not my version of coffee, no.
Okay, time. Rest.
So a quick break, then something else.
Talk about your book. Thanks, guys.
Cool. Awesome, thank you.
We want to give a special thank you to all of our Patreon supporters. It's because of you that we are able to continue to make these videos. And we want you all to feel free to always come with suggestions and ideas on the content that you want to see, because we are doing this for you and because of you. Thank you from all of us here at April.